Hello, welcome to today's mini workshop. Today we are talking about the central ingredient in community. And this could be a conversation that goes on for days and days, but really what I want to focus it on is for people who are artists or musicians, like most of us here. This also works for people who are, running a business of some kind or a project where you have an audience. I want to talk about the central ingredient that brings people together around community. And this is not by any means something that I've mastered. This is like an ongoing conversation for me, but it's been something that's been dear to my heart basically my entire life, and I'm always experimenting with and trying to figure out. I work with a lot of people, especially music. Like I think of musicians because I'm a musician and I've experienced this thing where you're making something good. You're making music that is like you've had people tell you this is really amazing or like this is my favorite song or whatever, but there's only like 50 people who are even aware of it, and you think for like the amount of work you're putting in and the amount of feedback you're getting about how good it is, it should be a bigger audience, right? And so instead of thinking about numbers of audience, which is really easy to do, I want us to focus today on cultural capital. And cultural capital of the 8 forms of capital is something that is, I think, one of the most, that and spiritual capital are kind of the most confusing to people, or the most esoteric. And they go together. I think of cultural capital as sort of the central conversations that we are part of. And so as I get on Instagram, for instance, and I look at my Instagram, the different people I follow and the stories that they post, I will have feelings. I will have, especially lately, gosh, anytime I go to social media, I have a lot of feelings because there's a lot of intense stuff going on politically, and people post about it. Those feelings I have are usually tied back to my core values. So I have my 8 core values, and anybody who's worked with me for any length of time probably has your own version of a core values map. The core values are the things that make us feel strong feelings a lot of the time. And when I notice that, oh, okay, these people are having a conversation like on Instagram stories, and they're posting something about something political that's happened or a personal experience that they've had that connects to the larger story, and I feel angry, that's probably because one of my core values is being like, if not obstructed, I'm like seeing like, ugh, I want the world to be a place where like we can feel free to explore and be creative and be all this. And it's not feeling like that right now. It feels unhealthy and non-free and all of this. So I just give that as an example of what a cultural conversation might look like. It doesn't actually have to be you talking to anybody. It can just be, sort of a larger thing that's happening. A more sort of pleasant version of this is I've been doing my 100-day project where I'm trying to just record a song every day for 100 days, even if it's quick, even if it's a cover, just record something every day. And there are some people who are following me doing this, even though I haven't really publicized it very much or anything. And there will be people who comment on my song and say, "Oh my gosh, I love this," or whatever. And they're doing that for a reason. It connects to their core value structure. Something about me singing a particular song that brings them good memories or makes them feel a certain way is probably helping fulfill some of their core values, or making them feel like their core needs, like of safety or something like that, are a little bit more secure. And so I just want to say, like, the spiritual capital that we're talking about, those values being fulfilled, I almost think cultural capital is like a communal version of our spiritual capital. So it's like us having a conversation about what do we have in common? What values are we trying to fulfill together? Like what connects us? And usually it's some manifestation of those values. So great, cool. That's the big idea. How does this apply to us actually building a community around our projects, around our art, around the things that are important to us that we are offering to the world? I want you to think about it this way. I think probably everybody who listens to music, which is almost everybody, has like one or two people who are just their absolute favorite musicians. And I want you to just think for a second, and it could be an artist, it could be something else, but just try to think for a second about somebody who would fall into that category, someone who you have recommended to friends, someone who maybe you've been like for me, it's Anais Mitchell, who is an amazing sort of singer-songwriter, and now she wrote this whole folk opera that became a Broadway play, and she's won all these Tonys and Grammys and stuff. But 10 years ago, or even more, 15 years ago, when I first heard about her, she was just like in her mid-20s and or young, I don't know, she's very young, had recorded one album, but it connected with me so much. And I'll never forget why. Like, I loved the guitar playing, I loved her voice, but I listened to her lyrics and I was like, she puts a lot into this. Everything is very carefully considered. And as a songwriter, I could be like, I love how you write songs. I love the intention you're bringing to this. I love the creativity you're bringing to this. And then and this was back when in Pandora, like just a song would come up once in a while. I was like, who's that person again? And one song comes up and halfway through it breaks into Arabic. She's just singing in Arabic. And I'm like, what? And it was a song, this was back when the Iraq War was happening. And I'm like, okay, she's bringing like the political sensibility of like the folk tradition, Bob Dylan and everybody, but she's applying it to current events in a way that I hadn't heard anybody else doing. And, for me as someone who grew up in the Middle East, and I don't speak Arabic, but, I lived in an Islamic country. And so just like hearing her do that, I found out she had studied abroad in Egypt. And so that's where that came from. But just like immediately, I was like a fan for life. And I could sit down, we don't have time to do it now, but analyze like, what is it about that was connecting with me? It's because like politically, artistically, creatively, I could just tick all these things that she was fulfilling that I aspire to. So she was, and I think really what a musician or an artist is doing when they're being successful is they're sort of giving voice to something that thousands of other people want to, but maybe can't. And then as that person has more of a platform, they become sort of like the person who is symbolic of a cultural conversation that we think is most important of. And so when I think about like, why do you buy a t-shirt from a band that you like or a piece of merch? It might look cool, like maybe it's because it has cool art, but really it's because you're saying like, I identify with this cultural conversation. Like this person is speaking about something that I care about really deeply. And I sort of years ago coined this idea of the third product when I was working with musicians specifically. It was like, most people think of two main products. There's like your live performances, whether that's recorded or, but you're on tour or going to a show. And then there's like your recordings, whether that's your album or your music video. And those are kind of the two main things people sell. You sell albums, but really there's a third product, which is the most important thing. And that is the primary cultural offering that you're giving that people will like, that will act as a nucleus for people to sort of crystallize around and say like, yes, this is the thing that we are trying to, like this is what's most important to us. And like that's what's happened with, again, back to Anais Mitchell, since I'm a super fan, I just always talk about her. She came up with this folk opera, Hadestown, which has had many different versions over the last 12 or 15 years, but finally came to Broadway a few years ago. And I went to that thing and it was still during the Trump administration. And I couldn't understand how, even though this thing had been written before he was the president and like, it was so applicable to current events. It was like insane. It was like it was an amazing conversation. And it was like having the conversation that I wish I could have, but like so thought out. And all these artists had like taken it to this amazing level. And I was in this room full of people who were feeling it at the same time. And so I'm always going to recommend this to people. I'm going to recommend her. I'm going to recommend any of her work. And so kind of in our last 5 minutes here, I want to start applying this to what we do, to what you do. And this isn't going to be sort of like an actual map or anything like that. This is sort of one of those like question and answer journaling prompt things. So I recommend sort of just finding something to write with. And I'm just going to give you a few questions that we can spend a little time with. So I will turn the whiteboard on here and type out my questions. So speaking of cultural capital, And you don't have to answer all these questions. I'm going to type a few out, find whatever speaks to you and go for that. Or you can just do them all in order and just kind of do the first thing that comes to you. So I know that these are questions that you should probably sit with for more than a few minutes, and I recommend that you do that. As with all of these, keep journaling about it, keep thinking about it. I want to close for now, though, just for time's sake, with just a very quick example of this in my life. I haven't been releasing albums for quite some time now, but the last album I recorded was called Buffalo, 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 Buffalo. And so right there, you already have like me calling to, like one of my, like my weirdness and wonder value is there because I didn't just name it something like simple. I like named it a big weird sentence. That buffalo thing is a grammatically correct sentence in the English language, and there's like a whole Wikipedia article about it and all of this stuff. And so that's like my little. It's sort of a little shout out to grammar nerds out there who like have heard of this and what like immediately somebody who knows that sentence is gonna be like, oh, I kind of know what this guy is all about and what he's interested in. We're having a similar cultural conversation. But more than anything else, as I sat with these questions and thought, like, what am I doing here? Like, what culturally am I offering? I realized like my whole album asks one main question. The question is, where are we going? And this is like as a country, as an experiment, as humans, as individuals, it's all about westward expansion and like a lot of the history of settler colonialism in North America, and the buffalo is this symbol of the cost of that. So like, just as an example of what this can mean is like, I think a lot of people who really spend time with my album and like it and love it, it's because they're connecting with that larger sort of political and social conversation. And at the end of the day, the human conversation of like, what are we doing? And Anais Mitchell, who I actually took a songwriting course with her like years ago on political songwriting. And she said that the best, like her working hypothesis was that the best kind of political song is one that asks a question instead of like preaches or says something. It's like leaves you with a question that you have to then wrestle with yourself. And really, I'll just close with this. I think that a lot of the cultural conversations we're having as artists have the opportunity to ask a question. And that question is going to be the thing that people who are your fans are going to crystallize again around, even if they don't know that that's why they're doing it. And so if you can be really clear on the question that you're asking, I think that it will sort of start focusing a lot of the rest of what we do and how we talk with people. And you can go to the places where people are having that conversation. And those are the people who are going to be interested in your art, in your music, in your project. Much longer conversation. And I'm going to be doing calls in the membership, like instead of having workshops and stuff in July, I'm just going to be doing like hour-long calls where we have a little prompt at the beginning, but then it's open-ended and we can actually like sit and talk about this kind of stuff and apply it to your situation. So if that sounds interesting or you want to talk more about this, come to one of those. But for now, thanks so much for being here and have a great rest of your day.